Hello and welcome back to our presentation on self-building, building your own home with Woodberry Homes Ltd. This series is broken into 4 parts. This is part 4, transferring ownership and beyond. Transferring ownership of property is called conveyancing. While you might already own the land, registering that ownership is an important step in the process in order to secure your interest and because it plays an important role in reducing your self-build costs later. We will be looking at whether or not you already own the plot, whether you need to hire a conveyancer, understanding the forms, and of course touching on how to save money. Do you already own the plot? You may recall a brief explanation on equitable and legal ownership in a previous part. Remember that ownership of property is having ownership rights vest in you, whether you are able to immediately exercise them or not. For example, if I steal your car, you may no longer exercise rights of ownership over it, such as to trade it in, but you still own it. I, on the other hand, would have physical possession of it and may exercise rights over it, but my intent to exercise rights which aren't mine may constitute a theft, specifically the right to appropriate and treating it as my own, effectively depriving you of your rights. It's all about rights. Ownership is actually rather ambiguous a term, especially when you have 2 systems that don't always agree, equity and the law. Generally, equity follows the law, but when there is a conflict, equity wins. It sounds a bit contradictory, and that's why we have lawyers. Today, the concepts are more confusing, since they are distinct and separate, but occupy the same space. Whereas originally, from the 11th century and hundreds of years thereafter, equity operated separate from the law, as in a separate system, and you could appeal to both. So, why does this matter? Well, rights transfer automatically, so the moment you pay or get planning permission, depending on the construction of the contract, ownership rights vest in you. You may not have control of the land, or have registered your entitlement, but you own it in equity. Additionally, once you have discharged your side of the bargain, i.e. made the payment, you are entitled to what's called specific performance, which is an equitable remedy provided by a court of law, ordering the fulfillment of any and all obligations due to you by the other party under that contract. It is still important to register your ownership of the land in the land registry, as well as update anything that needs updating on the charges register, because that is what gets you the legal ownership. Do you need to hire a conveyancer? Despite popular belief, no, you don't. If we take a moment to think about it, a solicitor or a conveyancer gets authority to act for you from you, which means that you already have those rights. You are just giving them over to another person to use for you. That means that you can do it yourself. Also, it would be pretty silly for it to be mandatory to seek a legal representative to register your interest, because it would be tantamount to saying failure to pay a legal representative amounts to a surrendering of your ownership rights, and the government, via the powers of the monarch, would take ownership instead. So absolutely not. You definitely do not need a conveyancer or a solicitor to complete and submit the TR1 or TP1 forms to the land registry. You can do it yourself or have an agent of your business with sufficient authority to act for the business, either by their position or conferred by someone in a high enough position to do it for you. I mentioned 2 forms. If you are transferring the entirety of the land under a single title number, you need to use the TR1 form. Think of TR as transfer. If you are purchasing part and thus transferring part of a larger parcel, you use the TP1 form, which we can think of as transfer part. The TR1 form is very simple. You don't need a law degree to complete it or any legal experience. The same is true of the TP1 form, although what you will need is a new title plan to show the area that you are splitting from the original parcel. This can be provided by a surveyor. The forms are both available for free to download from the UK government website. You will also need to complete a form for stamp duty land tax. There are exceptions, but if you're self-building, which we'll assume that you are or will be since you're here, you likely won't qualify for an exception, so you'll have to fill in and submit the stamp duty land tax form. The form is, for some reason, not available for download. Instead, you'll need to request for it to be sent to you. The forms. Simple can be daunting, especially if there are phrases you don't recognize. Sometimes you just need a little help, which is preferable to paying a hefty sum. So let's take a look. The TR1 transfer form is the simplest because registration has already been done. You don't need to fill in everything, just the new owner's details. The TP1 form registers part of existing property under a new title, so requires more information. This is similar to the FR1, or First Registration form, for if you purchased unregistered land. The transferor is their way of saying seller, and the transferee would be you, the buyer. There is a section about the title guarantee. You can either choose between full or limited. This is what the seller offers you. Full title guarantee is ideally what you want. Limited title guarantee means that the seller is saying they offer no guarantees as to any third-party encumbrances that there might be. This can be dealt with to an extent in the contract, but full title guarantee is always what you want if you can get it. There is also an AP1 form, which you may or may not at some point need to use. If you bought part of someone's registered land, meaning you need to fill the TP1 form in, the seller would need to complete an AP1 form to update their title to show that some of their land has been removed, and to make amendments to any covenants or easements that may no longer be upon them, or which you agreed to with them during your negotiations. Similarly, if you purchase the entire parcel, there may be some rights you want to remove from the charges register, in which case you would need to use the AP1 form yourself. It's worth noting that you can't always just submit a form to remove covenants and easements because they are contractual obligations. You need to know whether or not they run with the land. These are things you want to find out before you actually go to purchase it. At the bottom of each transfer form is a large box labelled Execution. The form says to execute the transfer as a deed, but doesn't tell you how to do this. As I keep saying, it's actually very simple. You just write the words executed as a deed by, or signed as a deed by, then your name, your signature, in the presence of the witness's name, their signature, and it must be expressed as a deed in this way by each signing party, meaning you and the seller as well. A 5-minute job costing only a few strokes of ink and a pen, a stamp, and a minute more to post. Beats paying £50 for someone else to do it for you. Woodberry Homes can guide you regarding any updates that may need to be done via an AP1 form, as well as regarding easements and covenants on the TP1 or FR1 forms. For the most part, anything to be added will have already been worked into the contract and would just need to be reflected in the land registry, not requiring yet another legal representative to read it, interpret it, and charge for their time to copy and paste the contents. This is what we mean when we talk about avoiding costs, avoiding inadvertently and unnecessarily repeating steps. Think of the road worker who digs up a road to do some work, relay it, only to have it dug up again the next day for the next bit of work. With control to direct the proceedings, one can avoid trying to pump up their tyres before patching the hole, so to speak. With a little determination and guidance from us, you can save yourself a lot. As I've mentioned before, you'll save money going with a professional. There will be an upfront cost, but it'll save you in the long run because the organisation will handle the expenses throughout the process for necessary services, documents, and administrative tasks. It saves you because it costs the organisation less because they know the ins and outs and have standing arrangements, whereas an individual would only be seeking to use each service once, and there would likely be more legwork involved on both sides. Self-building is a big project, and it will require equally large expenses. But remember that it is also an investment, not only in your home, but in your future and your family's future. You owe it to yourself to see it done right, and to work with a professional who not only has experience in the entirety of the process, but who understands this, and who cares in and is willing to invest in your vision. A professional like Woodberry Homes. We know how to avoid the need for additional surveys, repeated steps, and how to reduce the risk of investing in land which may prove unsuitable. Sticking with us during the building stage too will allow you to benefit from our strategies to save yet more expense and protect yourself against unforeseen issues which might threaten your project's completion, ensuring that in the end you get the home that you envisioned. Thank you very much for listening to our video series. I hope you found it insightful. If you have any questions, definitely do not hesitate to get in touch.